The official history of Hale County, Alabama, describes the Vance Plantation in plain economic language, a mid-1800s cotton operation that ended suddenly after a fire in 1852. But local stories tell something far darker, a crime so brutal that official records chose to ignore it. It is the story of an enslaved young woman who endured unimaginable cruelty in one night, and the terrifying justice she later delivered. For more than a century, the truth stayed buried beneath Alabama's red clay. It was finally uncovered when a rusted tin box was found, holding the hidden diary of Eleanor Vance. The fragile, stained pages of her writings reveal not a simple tragedy, but the unraveling of a family's darkest secret, a chilling act of vengeance that shattered the lies history once told. In her graceful handwriting, Eleanor described a world drowning in its own cruelty. In 1852, the Vance Plantation was at the height of its wealth, run by 117 enslaved people whose lives were reduced to labor, pain, and survival. Her husband, Josiah Vance, was not a violent man by nature, but something colder. He viewed human lives as numbers, managing people with the same detachment used for livestock. This icy logic had soaked into the land itself, creating an air of quiet dread that never lifted. Through Eleanor's eyes, we meet Adeline, a 17-year-old field worker whose silence carried an unsettling power. Eleanor wrote of her with awe and unease, noting the girl's stillness, not of weakness but emptiness. "She does not break," she wrote. "She empties." Her eyes, she said, reflected the barren land, and one day that land would demand payment for what it had seen. This line, written weeks before the tragedy, would later prove prophetic, a warning of something rising within Adeline that no one yet understood. Power ruled everything on the Vance Plantation. Josiah's son, Theodore, mimicked his father's authority but lacked his control. He roamed the quarters with arrogance, his presence a constant danger to the women there. Alongside him was Elias Croft, the overseer, loyal to the Vance name but known for cruelty. Together, the three men commanded every part of Adeline's life. They were her oppressors, and soon her targets. The early diary entries detail the everyday horrors of plantation life, beatings, broken families, and constant abuse. Eleanor did nothing to stop it. Instead, she documented everything, her guilt hidden in careful words. Her diary became both confession and evidence, recording sins she watched unfold through her window. Tension built one evening when a nearby landowner visited for dinner. The men drank heavily, their eyes falling on the young women serving them. Even the formal manners of the South couldn't hide their intentions. Eleanor sensed what was coming, a night that would end, as it often did, in violence against the powerless. She noticed Adeline that night, calm but rigid, as if bracing for a storm no one else could see. "Tonight, she is not empty," Eleanor wrote. That single observation marked the beginning of the end. When the guests left, the danger didn't. Josiah, Theodore, and Croft, drunk and emboldened, remained in the house, laughing into the night. Eleanor retreated upstairs, her heart heavy with fear. The air felt still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She ended her entry trembling. "The devil drank wine in my parlor tonight. Now the house is quiet, but it is the quiet of a tomb. They have gone to the barn, and I know they have taken the girl with them. What they do tonight will stain this land forever." The next morning's entry is pure horror. The violence that took place in that barn went far beyond the cruelty common to plantations. It was deliberate, repeated, ritualistic. Eleanor didn't see it happen, but she heard everything: the splintering wood, muffled cries, and the dreadful silences between. One by one, the men entered the barn, first Croft, then Theodore, and finally Josiah. 3 men, 3 assaults, 1 victim. Locked in her room, Eleanor could not escape or call for help. Her husband had ensured her silence, trapping her both physically and morally. That locked door became a symbol of her helplessness, the price of her comfort and privilege. When morning came, she saw Adeline being led back to the quarters. The girl did not cry or limp. She moved as if her soul was gone, Eleanor wrote. Her eyes were not empty, they were ancient. In that look, She saw both the death of innocence and the birth of something powerful. The next day, life continued as if nothing had happened. Josiah checked his ledgers, Theodore rode out to the fields, and Croft barked orders. Their calm broke Adeline. She realized she lived among men who could destroy a soul and treat it as routine. Her home was not a refuge, it was a stage for endless cruelty. As she tried to make sense of it, Adeline saw this was not drunken violence. It was a message. Adeline's strength had been seen as defiance, and the men sought to crush it. But instead, they awakened something that could not be controlled. Adeline could no longer eat or sleep without guilt. Everything around her, the food, the fine sheets, felt cursed. She poured her shame into her diary, unable to speak it aloud. The horror was now inside her. Meanwhile, Adeline's quiet presence haunted the plantation. Her silence spoke louder than words, a reminder of what had been done. To Adeline, Adeline was no longer a victim. She was a reflection of everything they had destroyed. Days later, Adeline noticed something chilling. "The men believe they have broken her," she wrote. "But I have seen her watching the barn, not with fear but calculation. She is not remembering what was done. She is planning what comes next." In the following weeks, the plantation fell under a deceptive calm. Adeline behaved with perfect obedience, her movements steady and precise. The men believed she was subdued. In truth, she was hiding in plain sight, planning. Adelina's notes grew more anxious. She saw Adeline studying the smokehouse, staring not at the food but at the heavy iron hooks above. She saw her near tools, scythes, axes, watching them with cold attention. The girl was no longer seeing instruments of labor, but of revenge. She began speaking quietly with others, the cook, the stable hand. She was not seeking comfort. She was gathering information. Adeline was learning the schedules, the weak points, the locks. Without realizing it, the enslaved community became her silent allies. Then Adeline found a small wooden bird near the barn, a child's toy, its neck broken. She understood. There was a message, a promise. A quiet warning of what was coming. The men who had caused the horror began to unravel. Josiah grew short-tempered, his rage triggered by the smallest things. Theodore's swagger turns into hot-tempered anger. He starts drinking early each day. Elias Croft grows quiet and tense, his usual boldness fading under a steady, creeping fear. Adeline's silence feels like judgment to them. It rattles their nerves. The men are now haunted by what they caused, and their control begins to slip. Adeline notices the whole place changing. Animals fall ill. A prized stallion breaks its leg. A sudden storm ruins part of the cotton. In her fear, she stops seeing these as accidents and starts reading them as signs, as if the land itself is pushing back against what it was forced to hold. It feels like nature is aligning with Adeline's quiet resolve. Inside the house, Adelina's mind frays. She dreams of fire and blood. At night, she thinks she sees Adeline's face in the corners of her room. Writing in the diary becomes the only thing that steadies her. She knows Adeline is planning something, but she also fears her own family. She feels like a silent partner to a reckoning she cannot prevent. She checks the overseer's log and finds things missing from the stores: a length of heavy chain, a can of lamp oil, a whetstone. Each item is ordinary alone, but together they point to a plan. Adeline isn't only thinking of revenge, she is preparing a scene set to unfold in the same barn where she was hurt. Adeline sums up her fear in one entry. Adeline moves among them like a shadow, collecting their wrongs like a debt. The men think she's broken. They're mistaken. They forged the very blade now held to their own throats. Adeline cannot tell if Adeline is a force of justice or something darker, perhaps both. Trying to make sense of the change, Adeline first decides it must be a severe break of the mind. In her world, such cruelty would crush a person. She assumes Adeline's spirit shattered into someone unrecognizable. She reads old accounts of possession and insanity and tells herself that Adeline's calm, step-by-step actions are not clever planning but a detached response to trauma. This is Adelina's limit speaking. Raised to believe people in Adeline's position must submit or collapse, She cannot imagine pain being forged into precise action. So she convinces herself Adeline is no longer herself, just a vessel driven by suffering, not thought. But her own diary begins to challenge that idea. She watches Adeline closely, expecting to see ranting, vacant stares, or odd tics. Instead she finds clarity. Adeline speaks calmly. She moves with purpose. Her focus is steady. It feels less like confusion and more like a surgeon's calm before a procedure. The evidence does not match Eleanina's theory, yet she clings to it because the alternative, a deliberate, justified uprising, would upend everything she believes. Seeing Adeline as unwell allows Eleanina to frame what's coming as a sad outcome of the men's actions, not a direct challenge to the system itself. If Adeline is acting from illness, then the event is a single chain of cause and effect. If she is acting from reason, it means the order of the plantation can be confronted, and that thought terrifies Eleanina. She begins to pity Adeline like a tragic figure. "My husband and son pulled the trigger," she writes, "and now they're shocked the bullet is still flying. The men, for their part, keep their simple belief: the girl is broken and therefore safe. They read her silence as fear and her efficiency as eagerness to please. They cannot see what Eleanina sees." Eleanina argues with herself in the diary. Is she imagining patterns? Is she losing her grip? This doubt leads her toward a mistake. Thinking Adeline is a danger mainly to herself, she considers going to Josiah to ask that Adeline be sold or moved, hoping to protect her from worse harm. She drafts the plea in her diary, then abandons it. She fears Josiah's anger and accepts that speaking up would expose what she knows and her own role in staying silent. "Silence is my prison," she writes. "I forged the bars. I will watch the fire come and say nothing." The uneasy calm breaks into open division. The split doesn't start in the quarters, which turn inward and still. It begins in the big house. Instead of uniting the three men, the shared secret eats away at them. The family starts to decay from the inside, pushed along by Adeline's steady presence. Josiah becomes obsessed with control. He sees disrespect everywhere and answers with harsher punishments. Whippings increase for small or imagined offenses. He tries to force back a tide he can feel rising, not realizing the real danger is one determined woman, not a crowd. Theodore responds differently. His cruelty becomes showy and frantic. He drinks even more and brags loudly about the night in the barn, trying to turn it into a story of dominance. It's a weak disguise for his fear. Feeling his father's suspicion and the overseer's resentment, he lashes out to prove a manhood he doubts himself. Croft is in the weakest spot. He's not family. His safety depends on being useful. He senses Josiah's suspicion and Theodore's instability, and it makes him wary and alone. He belongs to neither side, not the masters, not the people he controls. That isolation makes him unpredictable. Their infighting gives Adeline space. Busy watching each other and the larger group, they fail to watch the one person who matters. Adeline moves through the fractures like a ghost. Her careful obedience hides her progress. Their slipping grip becomes the door she needs to finish her plan. Even Eleanina becomes suspect. Josiah and Theodore read her quiet as judgment now. Josiah confronts her about her distance and sorrow. She cannot explain without revealing the truth, and his distrust deepens. The breakdown has reached her own room. In the quarters, people stand together in silence. They saw what was done to Adeline, and they see who she is now. They may not know her exact plan, but they know something is coming. Their quiet is not surrender, it is protection. They form a shield around her without a word. The Vance family grows isolated. Neighbors stop visiting, sensing the poison in the air. The plantation feels cut off, a stage waiting for its final act. Eleanina writes about the suffocating feeling that there is no way out. The world has shrunk to this one place. The turning point comes in a single moment. From her bedroom window one night, Eleanina watches Adeline slip out after curfew. The girl does not move like someone sneaking away. She walks slowly as if the night belongs to her. She goes to the barn, but doesn't enter. She circles it, hand along the boards, head tilted, as if listening. Eleanor realizes the truth. Adeline is studying the barn, its weak spots, its doors, and how easily it could burn. What Eleanor sees next destroys any last belief that Adeline's mind has broken. Her actions are too careful, too deliberate. This is not madness, it is calculation. Eleanor now understands that she is witnessing the creation of a plan, one built with intelligence, patience, and cold precision. Her fear changes. It is no longer a vague dread but a focused terror. She realizes she is watching a massacre being prepared piece by piece. Each observation in her diary becomes a nail sealing the fate of the 3 men in her household. One day, she spots Adeline near the kitchen, appearing to help with chores. But Adeline's attention is fixed on a large barrel of cooking oil. With quiet skill, she manages to take a small container from it, unnoticed by anyone. What once represented food and home life now becomes fuel, a tool for destruction. Everyday objects are turning into weapons. The weight of this realization crushes Eleanor. Her journal grows fragmented, her handwriting shaky. She writes of sleepless nights and whispers in empty hallways, of flickering lights that she swears look like fire. The line between reality and imagination blurs. She lives inside a nightmare that hasn't yet happened, but feels as though it already has. Then comes the final proof. She finds small bundles of dry sticks tucked into the tall grass around the barn's base, hidden from plain sight. Each one placed with care. Adeline has been preparing for weeks, setting the scene inch by inch. Every pile is a piece of her vengeance, a mark of her control and her endurance. For Eleanor, it is like stumbling upon the pieces of a bomb, waiting only for a spark. This undeniable evidence leaves no doubt. Adeline is not broken. She is not insane. She is deliberate, a force of judgment shaped by cruelty. She has taken an act of unimaginable violence and turned it into her own form of justice. In a world where no justice exists for her, she has become justice itself. This truth shatters Eleanor's beliefs. Adeline is no longer just a victim or servant, she is something greater, a power beyond the laws of men. Eleanor finally sees her not as property, but as a sovereign force, rising to deliver a reckoning that no court could ever grant. But knowing this truth brings no peace. Eleanor is the only one aware of what's coming. She cannot warn her husband. Doing so would ensure Adeline's death and risk her own. She cannot help Adeline without betraying her family and the world she was born into. She is trapped, her conscience caught between 2 impossible choices. Her only escape is to write. She confesses her despair in her diary. She dreams of running away but knows she never will. Her life, gilded and comfortable, is still a cage. Her duty now is to bear witness, to record the truth before it's buried beneath lies. Her writing becomes her last act of defiance, her only remaining thread of humanity. The section closes with quiet surrender. From her window, Eleanor watches a storm roll across the horizon. The sky darkens to a bruised purple. The air is thick, she writes. The world is holding its breath. She has chosen her night. The heavens will hide her work. There will be no witnesses but me, and the God who long ago left this place. The fire is coming, and it will burn away everything. The destruction of the Vance Plantation's authority is slow, not sudden, a moral rot spreading from within. Eleanor's diary becomes the chronicle of this decay, showing how the men's power turns against them. Their strength had always depended on the belief that those beneath them would remain afraid. But once Adeline's fear was gone, their control became a hollow shell. They were rulers of ashes, blind to the fire growing at their feet. Josiah's dominance collapses first. Once calm and commanding, he becomes consumed by suspicion. He sees betrayal in every corner, even in his own son and overseer. In one outburst, he accuses Croft of stealing supplies and humiliates him in front of the others. The charge is false, born from paranoia. But the damage is real. Croft's loyalty turns to bitterness. Josiah has broken the very chain that once held the plantation together. Theodore's downfall comes from weakness. His authority was always imitation, a hollow echo of his father's power. As tensions rise, he grows reckless and violent, forcing enslaved men to fight for sport to prove his dominance. But every display of cruelty only reveals his fear, the terror that he will never live up to the man he pretends to be. Croft's collapse is the most telling. Once the enforcer between masters and laborers, he is now alone. Josiah's mistrust and the people's silence leave him stranded. The enslaved no longer fear him, they answer slowly, obey without urgency. His threats ring empty. Desperate, he starts carrying a gun, no longer commanding authority by presence but by force. In this chaos, Adeline finds her opening. The men are distracted, each trapped in his own unraveling. The patrols thin. The rules loosen. Pride blinds them to the danger in their midst. None of them can imagine a young woman, one they thought powerless, could bring about their end. Their arrogance becomes the trap she needs. Eleanina's diary records how Adeline strikes with intelligence. One by one, she draws them toward the barn, each with a bait designed for his weakness. To Theodore, she offers temptation, a whispered promise of a secret meeting. To Croft, she plants a lie about missing tools hidden in the barn, an opportunity to fix the issue before Josiah notices. And to Josiah himself, she sends a message that there is something in the barn he must see for himself. Each man walks into the dark willingly, blinded by ego. Their power had made them foolish. They never considered that the girl they broke could be the one to end them. Eleanor understands the cruel symmetry. The same authority that allowed them to commit their crimes now leads them to their deaths. They never saw Adeline as human, and that failure becomes their undoing. The men of the Vance Plantation had built their world on stripping others of humanity, and now they were about to be destroyed by the very force their system created but could never control. When Eleanor sees Elias Croft walking toward the barn at dusk, she writes a chilling line that feels like an epitaph for all of them. Authority here is a ghost. It is nothing more than a story men tell themselves to excuse their cruelty. Tonight, a girl with nothing left but her pain will show them the truth. Real power belongs to the one who has nothing left to lose. And by that measure, she is the most powerful soul in this state. In those final tense hours, Eleanor uncovers a new layer of the story, not through documents, but through whispers she overhears. Two older women in the quarters speak quietly about Adeline, not as a young woman seeking revenge, but as a vessel for something far older. They say she has been chosen by a spirit of justice that awakens only when cruelty goes too far. This spirit, they whisper, enters those emptied of all hope and fills them with the strength to carry out judgment. To them, Adeline is not simply planning, she is carrying out a divine mandate. Her silence is not trauma, it is communion. Her calmness is not submission, it is purpose. This revelation shatters Eleanor's understanding. What she had thought of as rebellion or madness now takes on a spiritual weight. The sickness among the animals, the violent storms, the strange omens, she begins to see them not as coincidences but as signs that the land itself is aligned with this ancient justice. The fire that is coming will not just be an act of destruction. It will be a cleansing, a baptism by flame meant to purge the ground of its stain. Her role shifts. She is no longer simply a horrified bystander but the one person recording the truth. She knows the official history will reduce it to a slave revolt or an accident. Only her words will preserve how the community sees it, not as crime, but as retribution. She becomes, unwillingly, a kind of priestess, writing the sacred record of a ritual she cannot stop. The meaning of an earlier sign now becomes clear to her. She recalls the small wooden bird with its broken neck left by the barn. One of the women calls it the blood hawk, a symbol of violent justice from their folklore. Adeline's trinket was no random message. It was a calling card, a declaration that the old laws of men were about to be replaced by something older and more relentless. Eleanor's world shatters when she realizes the truth. Raised in the rational traditions of the Southern elite, she now faces a reality shaped by myth and judgment. Her fear turns from the men in her house to the unseen forces that govern it. If Adeline truly believes she is chosen, her vengeance is not driven by rage but by purpose. She is no longer a victim, she has become a holy warrior. I thought I was watching a girl prepare a crime, Eleanor writes. I was wrong. I am watching a goddess prepare a sacrifice. The barn is her altar. The oil is her holy water. The fire will be her prayer. What follows is not chaos, but precision. Adeline's plan unfolds in 3 acts, one for each man who wronged her. First, she lures Elias Croft with a story of stolen tools. He enters the barn with his lantern and never returns. Then comes Theodore, summoned by a whispered invitation. His arrogance blinds him. He walks into the darkness and is swallowed by silence. Finally, Adeline summons Josiah. Her message is direct, a challenge to his pride. Enraged, he storms toward the barn, unaware he is stepping onto his own altar. Eleanor describes Adeline's movements as calm and exact. This is not rage, it is judgment. As thunder rolls in, the night feels suspended, waiting for the inevitable spark. Adeline has become what her world fears most, a monster built to destroy monsters. Her choice feels less like cruelty than justice, carved into her scars and memories. Eleanor's final entry captures the moment. Adeline approaches the barn with oil in hand, walking like a priestess to a sacred rite. There is no madness in her eyes, she writes. Only purpose. Then comes the scream, raw, primal, final. From her window, Eleanor watches the barn ignite. Smoke curls upward as Adeline seals the doors with a wooden beam. The screams turn to silence. Standing before the inferno, Adeline is motionless, serene, complete. She is not part of the fire, Eleanor writes. She is the fire. By dawn, the Vance dynasty is gone. The sheriff's report calls it an accident, a lantern tipped, 3 men dead, 1 unidentified woman. Adeline becomes a nameless casualty, erased to protect the system. But truth burns through silence. The plantation collapses, its wealth and power undone. Whispers spread of a quiet girl who burned her masters alive. The story becomes legend. The land, scorched and barren, is left haunted by memory. Years later, her name returns in whispers, the Ashen Lady, said to walk the Alabama backroads, guarding the helpless and punishing the cruel. Whether she died or vanished, Adeline transcended history. She became more than human, a symbol of justice beyond law, a fire that never went out.